Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon or good day, depending on where you are located on this planet Earth. AFRAA is pleased to welcome you to our June edition of SkyConnect Dialogue. In this dialogue today, my guest is no other than Mr. Cheikh Diop. In a moment, he would have the opportunity to introduce himself properly to all of us and before we kick started. But as in previous sessions, ladies and gentlemen, please just take note that you will be able to participate in this dialogue by posting your questions in the Q&A tab or by raising your hand or putting it in the chat box. Time permitting, I will review your questions with Mr. Diop before we end the session. Today's session is going to run for 1 hour, as in the previous. And within the 1 hour, we are going to focus on a number of very exciting and interesting areas. Namely, we're going to review the African Airlines performance. Then we take a dive into Airbus traffic forecast and future outlook for Africa, both in terms of passenger, cargo, and even aircraft orders. We shall then look at key enablers to air transport development on the African continent from the Airbus perspective. And then we look at the Airbus support strategy for the African continent. I'm not too sure how many of our guests actually know that Airbus has a specific and well thought out and focused strategy aimed at supporting African air transport development. Mr. Diop will take us through that one, and we will round up our discussions by looking at the Airbus AFRAA partnership arrangement, how things are moving and what value adds we can actually bring in. And then Mr. Diop will give us some final thoughts that we can take away. So this is the summary of how we're going to run our discussions today. And I thank you all so much for making time to participate. Please do keep in touch and let us have a very exciting and very engaging discussions today. As I said, post your questions online or raise your hand, and then we shall give you the necessary attention in due time. Now, to my guest, Mr. Diop, welcome to AFRAA SkyConnect Dialogue today.
Thank you.
Now, and in today's session, as you had me already highlight, and before we dive into the details of it, I would want, first of all, for you to tell us a bit about who Mr. Diop is, and also a bit about Airbus and what Airbus is up to in recent times, post-COVID. So you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the people connected. I hope you hear me well. So my name is Cheikh Diop and I work for Airbus, as you just said, Raphael. I've been here for 20+ years. And I'm now very pleased to lead a project called Airbus Global Support Strategy for Africa. And we will see later on why this was put in place and what are the targets. Personally, I am originally from West Africa, namely Senegal and Mauritania, and I grew up in Mauritania until age 18 before coming to study here in France, and ever since I stayed in France. I graduated as an engineer in electronics, and straight after my graduation, I was offered a job by Airbus, or at that time it was called Aérospatiale, so the French part of the future Airbus. And 20 years or more after, I have been able to touch on several directions inside the OEM activity, namely engineering, designing airplanes, but also program management, where basically the people, I would say, drive the whole direction for a given program. Then I touched on procurement, and generally what we call general procurement, so procurement of non-flyable items for the, let's say, for the whole group. And since 2014, I am in the after-sales business, the customer services organization. And this project is also somehow driven from that organization, but very clearly all across Airbus. Now you asked me about Airbus. I don't know exactly what to say to everybody, because I think there is nothing that I will tell you that you don't know. The company is doing well. It's trying to also recover from COVID, like all of us, had to take a big hit. Say the business is going okay. The challenges are here. So the focus is on doing what we have to do and what we know how to do best. It's delivering airplanes to our operators, safe airplanes, good quality airplanes, and please our customer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the African customers of Airbus are very pleased with the products of Airbus, and even the passengers and the customers who use the Airbus fleet are equally excited about the products that Airbus puts out there to support air transport connectivity on the continent. Thanks so much for all that you and Airbus are doing for this industry. Now, I want us to look a bit more about the aviation industry in Africa. Specifically, after COVID, things are beginning to look up. There's so much optimism, and we can see it. People have been locked in for far too long. They're now trying to get out and get back into flying. And it's very exciting times yet. But looking at it from the Airbus perspective, are you seeing what we are seeing, or you are seeing even better?
Let's say we are seeing even better, because we see what is happening currently. The traffic has picked up again. It's back to nearly pre-COVID times. But when we look ahead, we see all ingredients for a booming market in terms of economic growth. Let's say the young population, which is a key asset, basically, around 70% of the African population is below 30 years old. So that's a very great asset if you compare it to other regions of the world. And they're all pushing for urbanization and, I would say, connecting cities as well. And this is what we see as good ingredients for, fleet growth that we are willing to support. If we look at our market forecast, it is forecasting something around 1,200 airplanes in the next 20 years in Africa, with, I would say, something like 80% of that being single aisle, because it's more for intra-continental travel. The remaining 20% will obviously be things around wide bodies. We also see good signs, great signs, because lately we see that the operators, the carriers in Africa, are really seeing the value in procuring the latest technology airplanes for several reasons: operational, economical, environmental. So we see the likes of A350s, A330neos, A320neo, and A220 flying across the continent. And this is, again, a very good sign. The challenge with these products is generally the technology gap with what the older generation airplane used to require in terms of skills. So we need to make sure that this gap is not only understood, but properly staffed, and to make sure that there is, at the end of the day, no surprises. And that's also part of what I will describe later. This will also drive not only the need for skilled employees to get this, I would say, this growth not only happening, but also make it sustainable. So we will need tens of thousands of staffed people, be it pilots, technicians, cabin crew, and this is only for the directly airplane connected jobs, but there will be obviously other types of jobs that this will drive. And it will also drive for probably infrastructure to be created and or developed from those that already exist, namely MRO capacity, training capacity, and education capacity as well. So for me, these are only positive opportunities.
So talking about this technology gap, is it a technology gap specific to Africa, or it's a global technology gap between the old and new generation products?
No, it is not specific to Africa. What is probably sometimes specific to Africa is that there is, with some operators, we see that the jump between the old generation and the latest generation was not necessarily progressive. So the technology is new, but any customer who takes it will have to master whether it's composite or engine new technology or any digital, digital means, because the aircraft are more and more digital. So this transition, some have done it progressively, and some African operators, we see that it's a straight jump, which is nice to see, but our role is to make sure that we accompany this jump in such a way that, I would say again, the knowledge transfer that is required is also happening from our end.
Yeah, in fact, I think that will be critical in actually ensuring that this new technology becomes sustainable and that becomes user friendly for longer. Because we cannot stop technology, and it's as it goes. We must just learn how to adapt speedily to technology as it evolves. Yeah. Now we'll come back to discuss a bit more detail about how what steps we probably will need to be taken in Africa to fill the technology gap. But before then, do you see the forecast? The outlook, both positive for passenger as well as cargo, or is on the passenger side you're talking about?
I'm mostly talking on the passenger side, but there's also obviously we see a willingness from many operators to also start to move on the cargo side. So for me, the growth will come on both ends. But the numbers I quoted was mostly on the passenger side.
Yeah, for us in AFRAA, we think that whilst there's a general tendency for traffic to grow, as in previous forecasts, even before COVID, we are seeing that the drive towards a single African air transport market even seems to appear to further increase this growth potential if we get the single African air transport market right. And so I want to believe that the 1,200 aircrafts Airbus is forecasting probably could actually double if we actually get a certain fixed properly and all the economic fundamentals working well.
And I subscribe to that, because today let's say the main hurdle to travel over there is the cost. It's the trip's cost, and we know that most of the cost is coming from taxes, and most of it is coming from the fact that the sky is not open enough. And there are other, I would say, positive impacts to SATAM, because it will probably drive people to work more together, to collaborate more together, to recognize the skills of the neighbor when he or she is more skilled than we are, but the neighbor will also recognize our skills when we have more than they do. So all of this is going to be there to just support the growth. And by the way, if you allow me to add this, the project that we have put in place, again, it's going in the direction that SATAM is trying to push for, because what we want to do is to support, facilitate solutions that will be designed by Africa for Africa. It's not about Airbus coming and doing, and then when we leave, the gap is the same. It's really about supporting, making sure that the lead is taken from Africa, and therefore we can then throw our resources and support in there to make sure that at the end of the day we can help that growth, but that growth is led and driven by Africans. So that call for collaboration and for opening, for trusting each other, for opening the sky is really going to help everybody in that.
Talking about collaboration, that was where I wanted to get on next. What in your opinion, your view, are the key enablers for air transport on the African continent? What would you consider key enablers? Because over time, in Africa, we've always talked about we want air transport to grow, but as much as we try, we see that our percentage contribution to global traffic still remains at about 2%. Hard as we try. So where are we not getting it right? And what are the enablers that we can pull? What triggers can we pull to get this right?
Yeah, and it's even the 2% that you quote is even more concerning when you see that the population is already around 18 to 20%, and it's only going to grow.
Yeah.
Let me try and touch on 3 enablers. Ever since we started the project, I spent some time on the field, and we've met several times. And with the team, we've looked really at what is happening. And don't get me wrong, by the way, the project, it's not the start of Airbus work with Africa. There's been a lot of things done in the past, but we're just trying to structure it more and having a longer term view and a wider dimension. The first element is really resources. One of the things that we witness is that a lot of the airlines have some very skilled people, but not necessarily in the quantity that is required. So what that leads to very often is that everybody is focused really on the day-to-day operations. The looking ahead, building strategy, and part of the strategy is also partnerships and getting things really beyond the daily operations is not happening because, as I said, most of the people who know are busy getting the airplane to take off and land every day or every hour. So this is, for me, a first thing. You need to have enough people in all domains to drive this business. The second thing is really the cooperation, the collaboration. Let me give you one example. Let's say MRO. Today, we know that there's not enough MRO capacity in the continent, yet there are some existing MRO. However, I am not sure that at the moment those are working with all the other African operators who need MRO capacity, number one. And I am not sure that they are collaborating, sharing enough, because it's in the continent's interest that more players come somehow into the continent to make sure that the capacity is there. So those who are already there can help the others grow, but there needs to be this somehow trust between both that will then push or reassure the current carriers to not have necessarily to depend on other continents. If we look at training, for instance, if you're trained, I don't know, in the eastern part of Africa, will you be able to work on the western part of Africa? I don't know, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, the training capacity can be built in such a way that it allows to be supplying all the demand of the African continent. But this will only happen if the countries open up, if there is recognition of a qualification by a local authority on one end of the continent, recognized by another end of that continent, which will give time for those who are only starting today to grow and build their own capacity and become also active players. There is another one which is also key. Most of the airlines in Africa are state-owned. Clear. So I'm not going to touch very long on the political dimension, but what I really want to insist on is this sometimes has impact on the stability of the leadership. Today, when we work, for instance, and we've witnessed it, we work with a team, you're not always 100% sure that if you come next year, it's the same leadership team that will be there.
Yeah, that's true.
If we need if you need a strategy, if you have a strategy and a vision, you need a bit of stability in the leadership to deploy that vision. It doesn't take 6 months, it takes a few years. And that area is also something that we are trying to call for. We don't have the lead in this, but it's certainly something that will be very helpful if we can all go with a certain view that, you know, the leadership in such and such area is there, it's stable, we can work together for a while and get things growing. So I hope I answered your question, Raphael.
Yeah, you have, and in fact, your answer is actually pregnant with many other questions, but I'll get to that shortly. I would want us to relook at, probably go into a bit more of the details of the Airbus strategy for the continent, and then out of which I would actually have some questions emanating from these levers that you think we can pull and fix so that we can get air transport right, these 4 key levers. So, but just tell us briefly, what is this Airbus support strategy for Africa?
Okay. Coming back to the global market forecast, we see that the growth in Africa, the fleet, as we looked at it, we believe it's going to grow ×4 in the next 20 years or so. So with that growth in mind, and with the technology change that I mentioned to you, we have decided that our role is to make sure that this is properly accompanied. And the purpose is very clear. We need to have a safe, efficient, reliable, sustainable growth of the air transport system. Right? This is our aim, and I hope it's our collective aim.
Yes.
And there are 2 dimensions to that. There's a very directly connected to operations, that's dimension 1, and the dimension 2 is the ecosystem that needs to support the operations. So the priority obviously is on the operations, making sure that the people who run the airplanes make the most out of their airplanes. And this is where we are, and we've already been working with the operators in a certain way, but we've seen some things that we can improve here and there. for instance, be more on the knowledge transfer side of things than, for instance, on the doing for them side of things, right? So that is a dimension that we're trying to change, with the view that if one day our people have to leave, then they leave with knowledge being absolutely clearly transferred to the people who stay. The other dimension is, as I said, an airplane is only going to remain airworthy if it's properly maintained, if the personnel is properly trained, and if the personnel of tomorrow as well is properly educated and trained. And this is also areas that we want to look at and see how we can help Africa find, build, drive solutions, but with us facilitating anywhere we can, anywhere we're requested to.
Okay, so tell me, on this knowledge transfer, it's a very good and a laudable idea because Africa needs it. But oftentimes, Africa is considered a net user of Western technology. And invariably, there's no contribution of Africa to building literally anything that we need here to get our economic systems going. Built in this knowledge transfer, are there plans from Airbus to get Africa somehow involved in some of your production processes? Or that is too far-fetched?
No, but the reality is some things are already happening in Africa. There's always room for more. But my area of focus, and when I say knowledge transfer, for instance, I'll give you a very concrete example so you know that we're way before what you just say, right? When you take a composite
Yeah.
Sorry, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. So when you used to have a metallic aircraft and you now operate a composite aircraft, you need to make sure that the way you will, for instance, do structure damage assessment is well understood, because it's not the same job anymore. It's technically different, the tools are different, the assessment is different, and the result may be different on clearing an airplane, for instance. So this, our role is to make sure that this not only is understood, but that if it needs new skills, new resources, it is there, and our job is to make sure that those people are upskilled as much as we can. So when I talk about really upskilling, it's upskilling for today's operations. Another example is we have lots of digital tools now that airlines can connect with. And we realize that they are not necessarily well known and therefore not necessarily well used for the good of the operations. So these are also areas where we can directly support and make sure, again, all the ingredients are put together for efficient operations. So I'm really talking about upskilling very short term for operations.
Okay, and you also talked about capacity building. Specifically, as you mentioned at the beginning, at the intro, look, Africa has a largely youthful population, probably more youthful than any other continent. Now, with such a young, enthusiastic, and eager population, in many cases, fairly well educated. Now, has Airbus got a program tailored towards capacity building for the youth?
A program as such, I am not sure, but again, this is one of the dimensions that the project has to look at. And you were talking about why hooking up with AFRAA, for instance. Today, we have to acknowledge the depth of knowledge that is needed just to answer this question is too wide. That forces somehow, it just requests us to connect with others who already have that width of knowledge. AFRAA is one of them. If what we need is tomorrow a set of universities, say it this way, that can all across the continent help develop that know-how, pass also the will to join the aviation market as well. And once this is done, maybe what our role could be is to connect those universities to other universities that we work with in Europe or anywhere else in the world, to make sure that we can help support design programs that will make sure that these well-educated people, these graduated people, can then work all around Africa and maybe even abroad, who knows, and make sure that at the end, somebody, when I say trained in South Africa, can work in West Africa and vice versa, because that, I would say that education system or education curriculum would be not only known, but also trusted by the whole continent. And this is where we can help by connecting some universities with more local universities. And it can even go up to when you have new management stepping in that from time to time is coming with little or no knowledge of aviation. It does happen. That we can also try to make sure that these managers who will then build the vision and drive the show somehow are also trained, I would say, in what aviation is, how different it is to other areas of businesses, for instance. And these are also things that we're prepared to do, to support, to make sure that at the end of the day, there is the possibility to supply all the demand by Africa for Africa.
Wow. I see that, I'm not too sure whether you are aware of this, that Ethiopian Airlines have already set up a university that runs both first degree and a master's programs, both in the technical aspect and the management areas. And are you actively in collaborating with them? Are you active collaborating with Ethiopia?
I am in touch with them.
Okay.
I am in touch with them. I also know that other countries want to do the same, want to put, I would say, again, some sort of degrees in place. And I think it's a good thing. The problem is sometimes we should make sure things are done in the right way. In a sense that, for instance, it wouldn't be right to have operations that are not optimized, an airline that doesn't have enough resources, and then not as Airbus focusing on that, but then go focus on developing universities or things. That's why I say at some point we need to make sure that when we do things, we do them in the right order, because for the, let's say, for the growth of the air transport market, we need to make sure we prioritize what we do. But in the end, the more of these initiatives there are, the better for everybody.
That's right.
Of course, today, my priority is to work with all the existing players to supply the short-term demand, while allowing other players to grow and join the show. As we say, there's a forecast, the market is going to grow. So there's no need to rush things that we know take years to happen. So yes, we are discussing with Ethiopia. We're in touch with them.
Oh, great. No, I mean, it's very interesting that you are actually very much engaged on the African continent, and you want to even get much closer to the key stakeholders, in driving these things. Now, the other area where African airlines have a challenge is on the MRO. You touched on that a bit earlier, where there are existing MRO facilities on the continent, some of which are grossly underutilized, and yet some African airlines are busy looking around everywhere outside in Europe, in North America, for MRO capacity. Now, my understanding of this is that in some cases, it is actually the internal dynamics within the airline, because the crew tend to, in some cases, prefer to go to Europe as against going to another African country. But I think that is at a small, that's a minor issue that can be dealt with at the management level. How do you think we can actually harness and maximize the utilization of the existing MRO capacity on the continent?
So the first point, as you started to explain, it's to understand the root cause. Why is it that people don't go? Is it, as you said, they prefer having a trip abroad and, you know, for, I would say, personal reasons more than business reasons, whatever you want to quote here? Or is it because they don't trust what is existing? Is it because it's certified by an authority that maybe they don't know, or they don't? I have no idea. You know, here I'm just asking questions. So that's what we need to understand first, because if it is due to lack of trust, maybe as an OEM, we can help facilitate this level of trust by maybe having an independent view and say, if this partner is a recommendable partner as per our view and our standards, then maybe that may help others. Don't get me wrong, I am not here to say that it only takes Airbus's words to convince everybody, but if it can help, that is something we are prepared to do. And if, for instance, some need additional, I don't know, type of qualification that they struggle to get, maybe we can also help get there. But this will always have to be under, let's say, agreement with the MRO that we're talking about and under their lead. Again, I come back to the principle, it has to be done and led by Africa, and we can support. So this is what we have to understand. That's why there's also an MRO work stream in what we do, to understand who are the players and how can we make sure that the players, not only we understand their capacity, we help them in any other way we can to get any additional accreditation, qualification that they may need. And then we make sure that this somehow is known enough and used enough in the continent. This for me will be, once we start to do this, we will be really on the good path towards collaborating, removing the boundaries across the continent, and understanding that at some point it takes several good actors to join forces to make a big, reliable, safe, sustainable air transport market in Africa. Let me quote just one example. Airbus, as you know, it's 4 major European countries that decided to join forces. It's not one alone, it's 4. And if they did not collaborate, I don't know if we would be where we are today. And at the end, I don't think any of them has lost its identity, but they had to join forces. Second example, we team up with all our competitors when we have to shape the industry of tomorrow. We team up with Boeing, we sit with committees, we drive the industry of tomorrow. So we can be in competition, but that doesn't stop us to collaborate, cooperate when we have a common interest And this is what I think we need to, again, wherever we can facilitate, we will. There are other bodies like AFRAA, AFCAC, and others, and IATA, and so on, who are also pushing in this direction. We just want to see where we can be helpful and help because it's in everybody's interest.
Yeah, we're talking about other bodies working in collaboration or in sync to bring about solutions. A few years back, AFRAA actually took the initiative of putting together existing MROs, a database of existing MROs on the continent and their capabilities. And this information was publicized and is currently still hosted on the AFRAA website. Now, the essence of this was to get as many other Africans as well as non-other African operators who might want to have their equipment fixed using these African MROs. And in fact, as such actually revealed that in some cases, their pricing is much more competitive because of the level of labor cost on the continent compared to the Western world. So how much you pay for a particular check on an aircraft in an MRO in Africa is probably much more less. And so this information where AFRAA continues to disseminate as and when the opportunity arises, and whenever we have meetings, the technical and operations committee during their meetings try to remind members of the availability of existing MROs and why they need to make use of these MROs. But beyond that, the other bit which AFRAA is trying to establish, they're almost done with the pilot phase, is trying to look at what we are calling spare parts pooling. So there's currently a program ongoing, which South African Technical has gladly agreed to host. We actually at the agreement finalizing phase, where there would be a stock of some components in the Johannesburg airport for operators in that region to easily be able to access. And once the pilot becomes successful, we are looking at replicating that in other regions. Ethiopian Airlines has already indicated to AFRAA they would be glad to actually do something similar using their base in Lome to take care of West Africa. Because otherwise, then when you have an aircraft on ground, oftentimes it takes quite a long time to get a component in before you fix and get it running. So I don't know how Airbus can partner or support or encourage or guide us in making sure that this one really becomes a very solid program for our airlines.
How in details is a question mark, and it's something we have to look into and see how we can help. What I'm certain is that there is something we can do one way or the other. For instance, I don't know, but you will need to tell us how difficult is it to get this running, because I know, okay, you're on the agreement side. But if, for instance, there are things we can help you with the suppliers that are behind, for instance, who are our suppliers at the end of the day, that we monitor the performance and for which we have regular discussions to support here and there this customer, this region, and things like that. So there are things we can certainly do. And at the end of the day, if we review and there is nothing more and you guys have done it all, then great, we can step back and wait for any of your difficulties, sit with you and see how we can do it. But my proposal here would be to discuss it, review it together, and see where the difficulties may be, and in those difficulties, can we have a role? Because what is clear is today there are two things we don't want. One is somebody using the wrong part, And here I'm thinking about, you know, for instance, the consumables. It's very easy to think that a glue is a glue, but a glue for one aircraft is not necessarily a glue for the other aircraft. So anything that can help these sort of things make, you know, be readily accessible for every operator is something that we are interested in. And second, we don't want an airplane sitting there for days waiting for a part that could have been there in hours, within hours. Should we have, you know, a spare pool available next door? As I said, again, it's not for Airbus to come and build, you know, or put a warehouse everywhere. It's about us seeing how we can support these sort of initiatives using existing warehouses, using existing players, but also, again, coming as a helping hand to make these great initiatives work.
Oh, great. So
let's take an
yeah. I just wanted to interject that earlier you talked about the technology gap, and you also talked about leadership in the aviation space, and even the fact that whereas in some cases we have skilled resource, the skilled resource is so limited that it is focused more on firefighting, trying to sort out the day-to-day issues to the extent that there's no time left for strategic long-term view of where the airline wants to go. Now, how can we get around this challenge? Because the airlines are always firefighting, particularly in Africa.
I don't know if I have the answer to that question. What I clearly can say is we're working with some airlines, and the idea is to first understand what is the airline strategy, fine. But also when we work with them, we try and understand where are the gaps. And again, I come back to the point number one that I made in the enablers. When you see a gap and you highlight it and it's acknowledged both sides, because again, here it's not about finger pointing or whatever, it's really about jointly agreeing that there is something to do. And then you realize that what is stopping you doing is the fact that they're missing resources somehow to allow you to build something that doesn't exist, but that resource cannot be swallowed by daily operations, otherwise you're not building anything sustainable somehow. And to me, this is the number one key. We cannot make the economy of some critical resources, and this is the first thing that we have to acknowledge. There are some who are here to operate, make the whole business run, and there are some others who are here to somehow step back, watch what is happening. You know, sometimes we say it in, you can talk about sometimes, what is it, quality, safety, all these roles that are not meant to be busy in daily operations. They are meant to see what is working, what has not worked, why did it not work, how can we fix it, put the fix in place, monitor that the fix is being somehow deployed, monitor that processes exist, because at the end of the day, the airline has to survive any person that may leave, and this is through documenting what is to be done, how it is to be done, and making sure that it is done that way. So process description, process adherence, you need people to get this done. Right? And all of this comes back to how many people you have on top of those who are here to run the daily business.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. And also your ability and the resourcing to be able to develop further capacity to support what is already there. Yeah. Now, on another aspect, I just wanted to check with you whether you have, for instance, oftentimes airlines buy aircraft from OEMs and they take delivery. Do you have an entry into service plan for your airlines, and how enhanced is this?
All right. For all of our operators, when they take a new aircraft model, we are running or preparing them to know the airplane as early as possible. What we have realized is that for African operators, we have to do a bit more than usual. Why is that? I come back to, again, how many people you have that you can work with. We quite often realize after the entry into service that there are some gaps here and there. So today, what we want to do now with new operators coming in, and we've just started a prototype action. It's really to get to know the customer a bit better, inside out. Again, it's not for spying the customer. It's really for understanding how to really dimension the support that is needed. So on top of sitting with them and asking them, did you buy your spare items? Did you send your documentation to your local authorities? And all these sort of, let's say, ticking questions. It's really about spending a squad of knowledgeable people to discuss with everybody inside the airline, to know where they intend to operate, to know where their warehouses are, to know how things work, really, with the view, again, that we point out the areas where there may be additional support compared to what we do today. And put this in place with the agreement of the operator and making sure that there is someone in charge with the African carrier. That we can, again, if it's a matter of knowledge transfer, we want to transfer the knowledge to somebody and not send our people for them to do without a proper let's say, upskilling plan.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I think at this point, allow me to go to our audience and take up a few questions that they have posted before we continue and wrap up. So I have Adikini, who says that SAF is bound to increase aircraft weights. That's increasing payload. And ultimately cost. How is Airbus preparing the industry for this?
It's a good question. I am unfortunately not the right specialist to answer all these questions. I can try and make sure I pass it to the right guys. What is certain is there is a big squad of people dealing with SAF in Airbus to prepare the whole industry, making sure that SAF is available, making sure that all airplanes can fly SAF in any area of the world. And all of these, I would say, additional questions as to what does it have as impact in terms of cost or impact on operations or things like this, is dealt with by this team. But unfortunately, I'm not, as I said, the one who's the most skilled to answer this question.
Yeah, Mr. Diop, I think what we will do, our technical team will take these questions, and afterwards they would send them to you. And if you can get your technical people to provide a response back to us, then we can share them with our audience.
I can take
that would be much appreciated.
I can do that.
Now, our next question is from Victoria, and Victoria says, which geographic areas of Africa are most in need of additional Airbus support facilities? Which airlines have to ferry their aircraft furthest to get support? And what specific types of MRO support could do with a boost in Africa?
So if we look at Africa, we shall not underestimate the size of the continent, 54 countries. And we shall not underestimate also the difficulties that are sometimes cultural, sometimes economical, and things like this. So yes, we look at Africa in a bit in a zonal approach. And if you say north, west, east, south, when we do our mapping of what exists today, I'm not talking about ambitions or what people are pushing for, but what exists today, then I would say the area where there is certainly the most to do today and tomorrow is the western part. But that part is also the part that is growing probably faster than other regions of the of Africa. So there will be things starting up in this area, and we want again to be supporting this growth and helping wherever needed. So I don't want to quote one airline or another one, but trust me, we are in touch with all of them, be it for their daily operations or be it for their plans for tomorrow. And with the view again that we have something that is somehow properly distributed across the continent to move towards something that is autonomous air transport system in Africa. What I would want to make sure is at some point, if Africa or an African operator chooses to go elsewhere than Africa, it's by choice and not because they are forced to.
Okay. Now another question from Alex. Thank you for this, Diop. Alex says, what is the maximum time for Airbus in solving customer problems from the time reported as part of support in Africa? I think this is a bit too broad. I don't know whether you want to say something about it, but it will depend on the type of problem that has been reported, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. So it depends on the type of issues that is reported. There are some issues that will normally take an hour to solve. And there are some that will take years to solve because you need to, at some point, modify something on the plane and test it and deploy a technical solution.
That's right.
But this, at the end, what I can share with you is in Airbus, when we have issues that are somehow what we call fleet issues, seen by many customers across our footprint, we monitor the time it takes. And we put some very clear targets, not to exceed targets, not to say that we meet all of them every time, but this is measured because, again, it goes with customer satisfaction and therefore customer loyalty. So this is measured. So as you said, the question is broad. So depending on the topic, if it's an AOG, we have a technical AOG center, which is there and has some clock ticking whenever something comes through. So all of this is somehow dimensioned and monitored.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you again for that. Now, Alison says, how do you see supporting app initio and command upgrades, etc., training on the continent?
So when app initio, it's part of what I call education overall, because I put training really behind type training where you qualified someone. So there are some areas in Africa where you can already do app initio. But we're pushing for, again, ability to have more of this across Africa. Now, us willing is not enough. We need to obviously find the partners who are willing and that we can help grow in this direction. Doing upgrades, I would say it depends what is behind. But if you look at an MRO, for instance, there's a difference between Airbus saying this MRO is recommendable and we believe they're good enough and they can do upgrades, they can do checks, they can do such and such. And the next level, which is, let's say they are Airbus approved, part of the Airbus network and blah, blah, blah. So this for me, step 2 is further away. The step 1 really is to make sure, again, that there's capacity that we all believe is good to work all across the continent.
Yeah, great. Now we still have more questions. Yes, and we're almost at time now, but just allow me, ladies and gentlemen, so that we take a few of the questions and then we conclude. Now, the next question is from Akini. He says, training is very expensive in Africa when considering the fact that most of the manufacturing firms and institutions are not within the continent. How will you mainstream this knowledge transfer and ensure sustainability? So you talked about knowledge transfer. I think the issue here is how would we ensure sustainability of
that? Again, we're back to the same story. For me, it's the same philosophy, whether it's MRO or training. There are some existing actors. First, are they known? Are they trusted? What can they do? What is left to be done? And all of these questions. Again, we are in touch with some operators and some training organizations on the continent, with the idea really to be able again to show that again we're partnering sorry with them. And the next step, as I said, is to look at those who want to become training organizations. So again, as I said, there's a lot of willingness from many countries, and wherever it makes sense, because we believe the plan is there, the infrastructure is there, the resources are there, so this new one is ready to go, then let's work with those and help them go and grow so they can offer additional capacity in the continent. Again, as I said earlier, if one decides to go abroad, Europe, US, whatever, it shall be by choice and not because there is not enough offer on the continent. And this is what we're trying to work around with, again, the local actors, and they have to take the lead. I insist on this.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let me take one more and then we go back to conclude. This one is from Emmanuel. He says, what are we doing to improve on reducing the lead time for availability of spare parts in order to reduce the ground time during maintenance of aircraft?
So 2 things. You spoke about the spare pooling. I think it's a great initiative, self-driven, which is great to see. The other one, again, I think I'm afraid I'm going to come back to resources, because anticipation is the key. But to anticipate, you need to be able to step back and not be absorbed in daily operations. There are people in an airline whose job it should be to look at what is driving the issues. And by the way, some of the people we have on the field are now tasked to try and get as much data from the airline, especially to help analyze what are the main drivers for grounding time. Because if we help do that analysis, we may be able to bring additional inputs to the airline saying, it's your ATA 32 or your actuator such and such that is driving most of your concerns. If it's known problem, we will give you what the fixes or recommendations we have on our side already. But if it's not a known problem and you're somehow facing this, by the time we make it a known problem and we work on it, we will recommend you to maybe go for more spare so you're less grounded. So this is back again to an analysis and then anticipation. So all of this is there again to help make sure that the business carries on flawless while some people are working in the background to prevent anything from happening. We lost Raphael.
Hello. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we had lost you, but you're back.
Oh, sorry. Now, I'm just saying that we still have a couple of questions. And like I said, the technical team will put this together and we'll send them to you for you to get a response and get back to us. But before I get your final thought, allow me to probe into what your partnership with AFRAA, what value has this partnership brought to both sides, and in your view, and how can we further enhance
it? So as said, I took the initiative to reach out to Mr. Berthet, Secretary General of AFRAA, because I believed with our objective, not working with the African Airline Association was not an option. Now that I know a little bit more, I cannot say that I know a lot, but I know a little bit more what AFRAA is doing and what AFRAA is about. I see AFRAA as a great partner, great networking, let's say, capability, to make sure that at the end, when we want to do something as a group, we can rely on AFRAA to have it done. AFRAA is also gathering data across the continent that we may not know, we may not see, which may help us tailor our initiatives or activity towards the right end because of or thanks to this data. When we discussed in Addis last time we met with the AFRAA team, we touched on several areas where maybe we could see what more could be done together. So the spare pool we just discussed, the training, when we say AFRAA is putting some training together for the airline members, depending on what the scope is, maybe there's a joint interest in us investing a bit of time in these training, be it courses or awareness sessions or whatever it is. And last but not least, I spoke earlier about the education. There's a wide knowledge of the continent that is needed to do a proper mapping of who can do what today and who could be doing what tomorrow. And this again is something that we can look at together, because it's with the idea to help prepare the staff of tomorrow. So there are many things that we could do now. The question is really how to structure this. I know we're all going to run short of resources at some point. So which is the most urgent to work on and start doing things.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy that there's so much value you see in the partnership with AFRAA. Let's keep it going, and let's enhance this and make it much stronger in the interest of the African aviation community. Finally, what is your final message to our audience? Any, if any?
Maybe a summary of what we said.
Sure.
First of all, it's great. It's at least for me and for all of us, it's great to see the trend that is taken by Africa when it comes to aviation. You're going in the direction of the products that will be there to help operational efficiency, to help, let's say, and economics and environmental issues, and that's great to see. We acknowledge that for some, this will mean, again, a step to be made, and we are prepared to support that step to be properly made. Right. Again, as I said, it's not about finger pointing whoever, it's about making sure at the end collectively the assessment is there, is shared, and we can help that growth in, as I said, again, safe, efficient, and sustainable way. We want to push for Africa's autonomy, right? And this is clear, and that's why I keep saying by Africa, for Africa, and we're going to be here to help. And we don't want to take it the other way around, where people come and ask us to do. This is no longer at least it's not the philosophy behind the project that I'm leading. We need to clearly focus on operations. This is our number one priority. But the infrastructure, because it takes more time, it needs to start also now. I insist on the enablers. I spoke about having a proper level of resources for the ambitions, be them operational or even strategic ambitions. This is going to help everybody. It's going to help us upskill the right people, not the people who are here today and there tomorrow simply because they have too many number of roles. And as I said, at the end of the day, we've started with some clear steps. There are some activities that were already done before we created this project. We're just, again, restructuring them. We've already started to make some concrete steps. And very clearly, we're thinking big and wide, but I like concrete step-by-step approach. So starting small is fine, as long as when we do something, it is something that is clearly a step that we can say now is set in stone. It's not gonna move anymore, and it's going to be sustainable. So again, this is what we need to keep in mind. We're here with shooting for a very wide and long-term view, but we have a small, let's say, window of time where we can be all convinced that this is worth the game. If in 5 years we haven't progressed, we will all say, okay, you know what? Let's let it go. Nobody's really willing to play the game. And I hope this won't be the case. So,
this definitely will not be the case, Mr. Cheikh Diop, because Africa needs the support of Airbus and all the OEMs to get African aviation to its next level and full potential. We would definitely come in and support Airbus with whatever you might require from our end as African key stakeholder in the aviation sector. And you can definitely count on AFRAA and count on the African airlines to really bring to us whatever support that you have conceived and you are rolling out. On behalf of AFRAA and on behalf of my audience, I wish to thank you sincerely for making time on behalf of Airbus to attend this AFRAA SkyConnect show today. And thank you very much for being so open and honest in sharing your thoughts about the various subjects that we have discussed. To my audience, I thank you all, and my apologies that we are 13 minutes over our hour, and I see you still glued to your screens listening to us. I thank you very much for your patience. I do hope you find it useful. If you have any comments, please send them to afra@afra.org, and then we would accordingly address them. In the meantime, we would forward your questions that were unanswered in this forum to Mr. Cheikh Diop, and then he would get them addressed and we would get back to you later. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Thank you all, and you can count on us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ishir. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Raphael.